Indie Beacon Radio with hostess Dr. Keitha Story Stevenson. Welcome to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. You can send questions for each show on Twitter using the hashtag IndieBeacon. Now sit back and enjoy learning about our guest for this show.
Hello, I'm Dr. Keitha. I'm with Indie Beacon Radio. We welcome you tonight to our program with Author Talk. We're going to be talking tonight very intently with Miss Kathryn Haueisen. I can't do it. Okay, Haueisen.
Yeah.
Haueisen. I want to say Eisenhower now. That's all I can say. Okay. Hi, this is Dr. Keitha. I want to welcome you to Indie Beacon Radio Author Talk. Tonight we are very graced with the presence of Reverend Kathryn Haueisen, and she is here tonight to discuss not only some of her new things that are going on, but some things that are in her repertoire that you will find exciting and worth pursuing. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is my pleasure. I'm excited about this.
Well, I am excited too. Would you please tell the viewers a little bit about your background?
Well, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, the daughter of a civil engineer and a librarian mother. I moved around quite a bit in my life, partly because of my dad's job and then later in life because of my own things. I have always wanted to be a writer. I have been reading since I was old enough to sit up. My mother being a librarian, I spent a lot of hours in a library. And I went off to college to study journalism. I have a degree in journalism from Bowling Green State University. I thought I would work for a newspaper or maybe a magazine. And I did do quite a bit of that sort of thing in the years when I was home with my young children. I did some jobs in public relations, and that consisted of a lot of writing press releases and feature stories about people and that sort of thing. So it's just always been part of what I've wanted to do. Along the way, I thought I might get a master's degree in creative writing and be able to teach, because I was living in Ohio at the time, and there are many, many, many community colleges all over Ohio. So I thought, well, with a master's degree, I could teach creative writing. My options to get that were Ohio State University, which I knew enough about to know I could not handle that and two preteen daughters, or a small college near our home, but the only graduate degrees they offered were in law or MBA or theology. And so I enrolled in the theology part of the program because I also had an interest in knowing more about what the Bible really said about certain issues. I had a sense that some of what I've been told was maybe not the whole truth, and I wanted to find out for myself. So I started out in a seminary program. We moved after the first year, and I re-enrolled in a seminary in Texas, and people came out of the woodwork to tell me I just really needed to go finish my Master of Divinity degree, and I did, and I served the church as a pastor from 1985 to the present moment, though I am retired.
All right. Well, we have more in common than you
Maybe more
realize.
than
I too am ordained and am a seminary graduate. So we have a good connection without realizing that we do. Some of the things that I know about you is that you're an award-winning author. You have published 5 books, 4 of them traditionally. You have dozens of magazine articles and writings out there. I think some of our viewers probably have seen your name across the Writer's Digest page or the Marriage and Family Living, House Beautiful, Highlights for Children, all of those areas. So we're talking to someone who's been in the game, knows the game, and understands how to produce. And that part is exciting for me.
Yeah.
When you said you've always wanted to be a writer, did you get that formal education that kicked off this desire for you at Bowling Green?
Yes, I was encouraged a lot by a high school English teacher. We had a school paper, and I was on the staff and learned a lot from her. I can still remember her name, Mrs. Keller. She's one of the few teachers I could tell you the name. And so with her encouragement and my parents' support, I went off to college and majored in journalism.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
I sold my first article to the Cleveland Plain Dealer, April 22nd, 1968. That's a date that just sort of etched in my memory.
Very good. Well, how does your spiritual background demonstrate itself through your writing?
Well, I come from a family that is pretty much unchurched because their experiences with the church have been less than positive. And so I try to represent God in my writing kind of indirectly for the most part, unless I'm writing for specifically faith-based audience or a faith-based magazine or a publishing house. Um, but my goal is to make God approachable as an entity that people could go to in times of need, because that's been my experience. And I'm sorry that it's not the experience for everybody. So I kind of feel like I need to apologize to people who have been beat up by the church rather than helped by the church, and to let people who don't believe what I believe know that that's okay. We can still be friends. We're still human beings on the planet. We have many things in common if our faith isn't one of them. So I try to weave spiritual background into my writing without being hitting people over the head with it. So I'm hoping that people who have no affiliation with the church would still be able to pick up one of my books and be inspired and encouraged by them.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I find that the solitude of writing requires for us to have some kind of solid support group. So who is your support team?
I have been blessed with so many wonderful people along the way. I'm currently living in Houston. I've gotten involved with quite a few Houston area writers groups. There's one group that we meet by Zoom every Monday evening to swap tips and learn things. I meet with those people face to face sometimes. I go to local writers conferences. I have some dear writing friends that I'm with either on the phone or by email on a regular basis. And then just my own faith community. I get a lot of encouragement and support from them. And I have a list of numbers. When I'm feeling pretty low, I have a list of people that I would just call until one of them picks up the phone and we can chat for a little bit.
Well, that's good. I think that every writer needs that unseen team that seems to undergird the strength to carry on. And if we don't have it, we find ourselves staring at a blank screen, wondering why we did this for a career, without realizing the impact and the power that comes from being a writer.
And also the network has to include editors and people who understand social media and people who understand marketing. It is a team. Writing is a team effort.
Right. And I find that I receive more positive encouragement that makes me keep trying, simply because I can reach out to people that are, like you said, on that list. I'll keep calling till someone helps, that they're out there for writers. And I think that we should encourage other writers with that. So let's jump in and discuss some of your books. For example, explain what inspired you to write God in the Raging Waters.
Okay, well, actually, I'm the editor on this book. The designated author is my bishop. So we live in Houston. Hurricanes Katrina and Rita both hit in our geographic area of the Lutheran Church. And my Bishop Paul Blum, he's now retired, but he wanted to write his experience of dealing with those two monster storms as sort of his retirement project. Augsburg Fortress wanted the book out on the 1-year anniversary of those. And so I asked him, just write stream of conscious, like a diary, everything that comes to your mind about what it was like to be the bishop of dozens of congregations that were in serious trouble and hundreds of families that were in serious trouble because of those storms. And so it's basically, I ghost wrote it. So he gets his name on it because he's the bishop. But I got my name on it as the editor because I did the majority of the work.
I understand.
So it is the story where God showed up in some amazing ways. In just the worst of the devastation you can imagine in New Orleans. I did not see the city until about 6 months after the storm hit. And people would drive me around and say, well, that's where the mall used to be. And that's where that used to be. And there were cars stacked up as high as you could underneath the overpasses in the city. it looked like a war zone. And one of the things that was really weird was they took us to the district where so many of the artists live, and it was quiet. There were no cars, no kids, no birds. It was eerie. It was just like being on another planet. So I started hearing all these stories and think, well, where is God in these storms? Well, God is in the disaster zone with the relief workers who came from all over the country.
Absolutely.
With the volunteers who risked their lives to go in and rescue people, with the people who just worked around the clock. One guy's called Magnet Man. He just drove up and down the streets looking at the discarded refrigerators and taking the magnets off of them and putting them on the side of his car and just driving around to see if those magnets belonged to anybody, so he'd give them back to them. So they'd have that little bit of memory of what used to be their home. I mean, there's thousands of stories like that.
It's very touching, very, very insightful to step into a disaster zone and look for signs of life, that it can.
It's really humbling.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, very humbling. And you quit complaining about some of the problems that you think you had.
Absolutely, by comparison. What would you say would be the biggest takeaway that a reader would get from this book?
From this one, it would be how really wonderful people are in times of disaster. The media likes to talk about the looting and the people who scam people and that sort of thing, and that happens. But the media doesn't get to meet all of the people who just show up and work and work and work without pay, and often at great expense and inconvenience to themselves, because they had to come from someplace. They were staying in camp-like conditions in no basements in New Orleans, but in church Sunday school rooms or fellowship halls, on cots or air mattresses. Those are the real heroes, and they don't usually get much attention from the media.
Right. So a book like this then defines more the sense of hope than it defines what bad things happen, that there's still good at the base of that. I found that to be particularly exciting to know that. And to be an author who can take that generalized view, that overview, and convert it into a spoken word that can then be in turn life-altering for the reader. I think that puts them on the scene and makes them realize there is hope. So I applaud.
One of the stories was there's a kindergarten teacher someplace up in Iowa who had her class write letters and collect things to send down to New Orleans. And the school principal got a hold of that story and said, well, we're going to make this a school project. So they had the entire school writing letters and collecting things to send down to New Orleans. And then it was a fairly small town. The mayor of the town found out that that's what they're doing, so it became a town project. There were a couple of volunteers who said, well, we can't go down and help because we're farmers, we can't be away from home for that long, but we can deliver it. They filled up a horse trailer full of all these things that these school children had collected, drove the two of them through the night, unloaded it, let some people feed them a meal, and turned around and drove back, because that was all the time they could spare to be away from home. But it was that important to them to get the items down there.
That's wonderful.
So this book and the other one, A Ready Hope, are full of stories like that.
Excellent, very inspirational.
This one, A Ready Hope, Effective Disaster Management for Congregations, it's aimed at two audiences. One is, if the disasters come into your town, here's what's going to unfold for the next year. My daughter that I co-wrote this with actually works full-time in disaster response and has since shortly after Katrina. So it's a lot of things to think about before you just say, well, we're just going to open our fellowship hall and let all these people come in. You need to know some things before you do that. So the book is aimed at congregations that might, pardon?
I said, we're going to need to step away for a moment and come back, but don't forget where you are, because I want to continue this line of thought, but it's time to step away from our interview to allow our sponsors to do their things. So we'll be right back.
Okay.
Make sure you join us, viewers, so that we can get the insight on how it is to be this effective with the power of the word.
The 5th annual Authors Marketing Event is coming to Granbury, Texas, July 24th through the 27th. Join us and learn from the professionals how to properly market and sell yourself and your books. Go to ame.authorsmarketingguild.com for all the details. That's ame.authorsmarketingguild.com.
I'm Rox Berkey.
And I'm Charles Brakefield. We're award-winning co-authors, Brakefield and Berkey, of the Enigma book series. There are 10 books in the series, with book number 11 planned for release in January 2020.
Each story has a central technology focus ranging from identity theft to cryptocurrency and now AI wars. These adult techno thrillers pit cyber good guys against cyber thugs across the darknet.
In our world, technology is today's weapon of choice. You can enjoy ebook format, paper, or Audible. We want your feedback.
Until the next story, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, hello there, my friends. My name is Randy James, independent voiceover producer in the Dallas, Texas area, available to write and record a 30-second commercial, much like the one you're hearing right now. It's a great way to help increase awareness and exposure to your book title. It's easy to do. Simply call me and we'll brainstorm on a few ideas, and in a few hours, I'll whip something up and send you a digital file ready to use. Remember, call or text me, Randy James, at 214-762-1942.
Hello, I am the author and poet Denise Bryson. I am the author of The Things That Cross My Mind, Love's Reality, both in book and audio form. I am also noted as one of the best poets of 2011. I have 2 new projects coming up. One is the Blinky series, where Blinky tells us all about our coins and our bills for our children. I also have a book coming out called Say Ye. It's quotes from Denise Bryson, just inspirational and that will help you along the way.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
All right. I want to welcome you back to Indie Beacon Radio. I'm Dr. Keitha, and I'm honored to be back with Reverend Kathryn Haueisen to the broadcast. So I want to thank you for joining us. And you were discussing with us your book that is called A Ready Hope. And you
Yes.
were talking more about it being... I'm sorry? It seems to be more involved in action than it does in telling a story so much. It's like taking us into what to do during disaster situations. So can you give the viewers an understanding of the ministry?
Yes. So after I did disaster response work for 6 months, I took a leave of absence from the church I was at the time and did disaster response. And I learned how much the covering communities depend on the faith-based people to come down and help. And I also learned how well those faith-based organizations work together. They're all linked together through something called National Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. And they've kind of, over the years, just kind of each taken a particular role. So one community finds places to store all the things that people ship. And another one finds ways to feed people. And another one finds ways to rebuild the houses and so on and so forth. So I was just amazed at how well they all come together and pitch in and help, and how little the average person in the pew knew about all that. So I talked my daughter into co-writing the book with me. So it's partly to educate congregations on what's going to happen to them and their community for the first year, because the media leaves within a few days, but the recovery takes years. And then I also wrote it for all the volunteers that want to come down, things they think they need to think about before they come. So for example, we had a campus group that wanted to come down on a spring break, and kudos to them, they want to include somebody who's in a wheelchair, but what they didn't understand was there is not a level place in the entire city. It was not going to be very easy to have somebody in a wheelchair navigating their way around New Orleans in the first months after that storm. So a lot of practical tips about things to think about, ways to help besides hopping in a van and running down to the disaster zone. Because if they come unprepared, they're just adding to the trauma. The people in the disaster zone are already highly stressed people. They don't need more people coming down that need hand-holding. So we wrote the book for two reasons. What's going to happen, and if you want to help, well, then really be a source of help and not add to the trauma.
Well, that keeps the chaos down. That helps and allows the needs to be met efficiently, and people need that instruction. They do, because their heart is in the right place. They want to run down and do everything they can, but if they don't know what they need to know, and they don't know what they don't know about that, then they can be more in the way, more of a burden, and maybe they're needed somewhere else to do a more effective thing. So it sounds like a really good thing to have, a working thing. Sounds like a really good study that would be good for churches that are involved in disaster relief. So that's very exciting. Yeah. Now, this year, we're looking forward to the release of your historical fiction, Mayflower Chronicles, The Tale of Two Cultures. Could you tell us what to expect? Maybe drop us a hint?
I am very excited about this project. So two of the people on the Mayflower, well, 2 adults plus 2 children, are my direct ancestors. My mother was a reference librarian. She spent her retirement years documenting this. I'm a direct descendant of William and Mary Brewster on the Mayflower. Then my daughter got married to a young man who is about half Hispanic heritage and half Native American heritage, which means my grandchildren, 3 of them, have a fair amount of Native American heritage. So we tell them, you are the whole Thanksgiving story. You're both the Native Americans and the people of the Mayflower. And so we've joked about that for years, but then I started getting really more interested in what really did happen back then. And so I've spent about 7 years doing the research, and I have learned that the version of Thanksgiving that we teach our children is, I won't say it's totally inaccurate, but it really is incomplete. It leaves out a lot of important details. So I spent all the time researching this book in 4 countries, and 7 years writing it. Is now in production with Green Writers Press. We're aiming to have it out in the fall in time to take advantage of all of the 400th anniversary events that are taking place. Just this past week, I wanted to find somebody from the Native community to read the manuscript before it goes to press, to make sure I haven't unintentionally done some really horribly offensive thing, because I'm trying to mend fences and cultivate better relationships between different cultures in this country. It's a big concern of mine. So I put out the search far and wide to find somebody that would have the time and be willing to read the manuscript. A friend of mine in Rhode Island put out the call on my behalf through, I just love this, through Nextdoor Neighbors app, and found out that she has a neighbor she did not know who is from the same Native community that was there with the Mayflower story, and even better, is a direct descendant of the leader of that Native community. That was the one that sat down with the people on the Mayflower and said, well, if you're not going back to England, I mean, here you are with children and women and building supplies, then let's work out a treaty. And so I am now in communication with a direct descendant of that Native leader. And she knew about my people because she's quite familiar with the story. And so I'm just really over the moon excited about all of this.
That it's worth being excited about, I can tell you. We're going to take another break here to hear from the sponsors. So if you stay with us for a little bit longer, there's more insight to come.
Thank you for watching or listening to Indie Beacon Radio. Our sponsor, IndieLector.store, is the only bookstore that pays authors their fair share for book sales. Help authors to succeed and enjoy a great book by supporting them at IndieLector.store. Enjoy a 10% discount with coupon code SHOPPER20 at IndieLector.store. Coupon valid until December 31st, 2020. That's IndieLector.store, coupon code SHOPPER20.
What started as a love letter to her son has become an international love letter for all parents to their children. Now you can read acclaimed author Shanalee Charbonneau's story to your children. When her son was very sick, she calmed him by singing her own song to him. She turned that song into the book, My Mama Loves Me, I'm Her Little Boy. She wrote 3 more magical books for all parents and kids 6 and under. Available at Indie Lector, Amazon, and all local and national outlets.
We Fiction is a fun, fast-paced writing contest for any author team to create a book based on what readers submit for plot, characters, locations, and even plot twists. Learn more about this unique contest at wefiction.dearindie.org.
Authors Marketing Guild is a membership-owned organization designed to help authors succeed and learn how to better market and sell themselves and their books. Join us at authorsmarketingguild.com and receive so many benefits you'll wonder why you didn't join sooner. That's authorsmarketingguild.com.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. Don't forget to like us, follow us, or subscribe to one of our many channels. Now, here is your host for today's show.
Welcome back to Indie Beacon Radio. I'm with Reverend Kathy, and we want to talk a little bit about her, finishing up here about the Mayflower Chronicles, which is her coming up book. Do you have a print date yet, or when do we look for that?
September.
Okay, good, September.
We're going to have review copies out by April, and then the book will actually be available in September.
Is this your first historical piece that you've done?
Yes. Yes, and I wrote it as historical fiction because I really wanted these people to be talking to each other, and we didn't have tape recorders running back then, so we have a lot of journals, but I wanted them to have conversations, and I wanted more of the women's perspective, and I wanted more of the Native perspective than we usually get in most of the stories that we tell about Thanksgiving. So
that should be very well received. I know that the North American Indian Council very often wants information like that. They want to see that kind of writing. So I'm excited that you're putting this effort forward and perhaps opening eyes to history that was never there before. Now, I know that we can find your book on Indie Lector Bookstore. Where else can we find your books?
They're usually available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
In case of this one, The God in the Raging Waters, is available from the publisher, which is Augsburg Fortress. This one was published by Alvin Institute, but they went out of the book publishing business, so it's now with Roland, Littlefield Roland, and Amazon and Indie Bookstore. Mm-hmm. And the Mayflower story is being published by Green Writers Press, so it'll be available there. I'm sure other outlets, but that'll be the main place that I would go look for, Green Writers Press.
Well, one of the exciting things I'm sorry?
I am collecting names of people who said, I want to know when the book is available. So if people want to reach out to me through my website, which is easier than my last name, it's 3 words. How Wise Then, THEN, howwiseden.com. If people want to reach out to me there, there's a place to sign up, and they can drop me an email, and I'm happy to add them to the list of people who want to be notified when the book is available.
Excellent. And I understand that you want to deepen your efforts in public speaking to open more doors of opportunity for you. So I assume we can go back to the email and contact you that way. Yes. Do you have topics that you prefer or information you prefer to give out as far as what you offer?
Well, I'm focusing on 3 right now. And one of them is the disaster response, mm-hmm. A summary of those 2 books. Another one is divorce, but not so much on divorce itself, but on the shifts in culture and the attitudes around marriage and divorce that have shifted significantly in the past 50 years. And maybe there's something going on in society that so many marriages don't make it to the finish line. So I'd love to talk about that topic. And then, of course, the Mayflower Chronicles. I would just love to have a chance to talk to people about the rest of the story, as I think of it. There was a treaty. I never learned there was a treaty. There was a treaty that the Native Americans and the people on the Mayflower sat down and negotiated and honored for 1 generation. I never heard about that. So for a moment in time, we decided cooperation was a good idea, and I'd like to see us get back to that.
Yes, I would too. I think that would be awesome. It would enforce and reinforce relationships between all cultures, and we do need that desperately. Yes. So I think that, colleges, universities, historical societies should also be standing in line, seeking someone who can come in and give informed information. Do you have something on the boards now? I've got a new idea coming up. I know from a writer's point of view, very often in the midst of the ending of the thing you're doing comes the great idea for the next thing you're doing. You got something in the works?
Well, I have, yes, I do. I have a couple of them, but I'm not doing anything with them because it's full steam ahead with getting the Mayflower Chronicles out there. But I would like to try to write, it would be a biography, but I'd like to write it as an autobiography of Mary Brewster, my great, great, great back 12 times grandmother. I knew very, very little about her till I started doing the research for this book. She left 3 children behind in Europe when she got on the Mayflower. They brought the 2 younger kids and left the 3 older ones back with friends. I never knew that. So she was an amazing woman. So I'd like to write a book as though it was her autobiography. And then I would also like to write a book that the tentative title right now is Faith of Our Mothers and Fathers, that would be probably a series of interviews with people who obviously are operating out of some deep sense of faith and values, but they don't talk about them because they're not trying to proselytize anybody. It's just who they are. I'd like to do kind of a series of interviews with them and say, so, tell us about it. This is a safe place to talk about what really motivates you, what are the things that you believe, and that sort of thing.
Sounds like we should be standing in line waiting for the next book. But I appreciate so much. I am honored to have you tonight and that you took time to be with all of us. And I wish you best on all of your endeavors. And I think I'm going to go online and get myself a couple of books I need to read tonight or tomorrow or the next day. I used to teach a history class, and I would like to share that information. I'll have to give you a call on some of the things I know about the Mayflower experience. And so by no means what you know, but it would be exciting to have someone to talk to from a historical perspective. But once again, we thank you. We are honored to have you here, and you have a blessed evening.
Thank you for listening to Indie Beacon Radio, where creative souls can find help in marketing their creations. To learn more about Indie Beacon services, to be a guest on the show, or to advertise on our show, please visit our website. Indie Beacon Radio, with hostess Dr. Keitha Story Stevenson.
Indie Beacon Radio is produced by B. Allen Bourgeois for Authors Marketing Guild, LLC, copyright 2020. Voiceover by Randy James, Lydia Bello, and B. Allen Bourgeois. To be a sponsor of the show or for more information, please email us at info@authorsmarketingguild.com. To be interviewed for the show, please complete the form at radio.authorsmarketingguild.com. Music Always Rejoice by Ramcord of Ukraine.